symbionts who can cultivate a different understanding of non-humans through literally taking on their characteristics, literally being like a leaf in some bodily sense. And this seems to me, again, sort of a misguided attempt to root some sort of solidarity in a physical experience of, having some characteristics of, say, a monarch butterfly, and other things, but that's one of the most sort of provocative points, and rather than some kind of recognition of a more Misesian read of a structural position or similarity. And so the last thing I want to talk about is this Sonara Taylor's new book, Beasts of Burden, which proposes a sort of position of solidarity with non-humans that's rooted in disability studies and her experience as a disabled person. And she critiques in this book, she discusses a long history of wherein people with disabilities are treated as less than human, and this has traditionally produced an antagonism between animal rights activists and disability activists. But she's trying to critique the ways that certain abilities and capacities are considered essential to the definition of the human, and then that creates the boundaries between the human and animal world, and in turn licenses non-humans to be inferior, used, and dominated. And she's primarily engaging with animal rights discourses. She doesn't have, it's certainly not a Marxist book, and she doesn't have much of a read of, in general, I think, really political economy or production or reproduction are these things. But there are a few moments in reading the book where some interesting possibilities come to mind. One is where she discusses meatpacking plants, which she proposes ought to be read through a disability lens, given that they disable thousands of people annually who are themselves in the process of killing and disassembling animals for production. And so she sees this as a potential way to read through a disability lens. I think there's also some potentially, and has a few moments of identifying, of reading potential identification of shared oppression or exploitation between workers and the animals that they're whose job it is for them to kill. There's another is in the potential, she describes the huge number of animals who are used in research experiences, experimental research, and for various kinds of predominantly biomedical applications. And I think you could see, she mostly discusses the ways that some disability activists have rejected the logic that this is necessary to heal human diseases or disorders, but I think there's also something interesting to think through in the growing number of people who, as Melinda Cooper and Catherine Walby describe, are working as clinical laborers who are working in themselves, being experimental subjects as biomedical industries grow. And so there are, I think, a few places you could look for this kind of, where this kind of overlap might occur, but what I find most interesting in this work is the work of kind of imagination and some kind of consciousness building around trying to recognize a way that a shared position of oppression or exploitation, and rather than sort of recognizing that the ways that certain people, certain human beings, and non-humans have been treated similarly as a reason to reject any kind of, relationship to or recognition of shared position with non-humans might actually be a source of insight and potentially something like solidarity. And so here I guess I want to end with what I think is, I'm hoping to get out of this. And so Sylvia Federici notes that her call for wages for housework was intended to function not so much as an economic demand simply for wages, but a political perspective whose significance can come in, as she puts it, demystifying and subverting the role to which women have been confined in capitalist society. And so I hope that taking a similar perspective, again, a political perspective that's maybe, and I think there's value in demanding wages to drive up the cost of that cheap nature, cheap labor, but also in taking a political perspective that can press on the way that being assigned to the category of nature has tended to legitimize domination, ownership, exploitation, appropriation. And in taking that perspective to undo the more oppressive dimensions of Cartesian dualism, to help us interrogate what might happen if the category nature didn't entail a particular set of economic and political relationships, rather than simply trying to move. So I think the traditional move has been to move human beings out of the category nature, which I think is important and ongoing work and certainly is not finished. But there's also a question of why it is that the category nature licenses domination and oppression. And so that's just a start. I'd be very curious to hear what thoughts people have on both other ways to think about this question, places you might, I guess more sort of places to see this in action, what sort of this might look like, since of course it would not be it won't look like any sort of the way that we imagine political subjectivity or shared labor struggles in the past. But I think it's crucial to figure out that we can way to change our relationships to non-human nature, not only after the revolution or after decarbonization or after the collapse, but as we are going along and building what we would like to see. So with that, I'll finish.
The first round. Any questions? One from Jason. Okay.
These were all great talks. Really, Alyssa's and Ben seem like two halves of the amulet in some ways. And by the way, Alyssa's written a really wonderful piece on Donna Haraway's thinking in N+1 that I would encourage everyone to look at. Yeah, Alyssa, you're raising precisely the right questions. Why folks like Tim Morton, and to a lesser degree Haraway, who I find much more useful, drive me crazy, is because history is epiphenomenal. And it seems to me that the best of the Marxist tradition, it's not only Marxist, but the best of the Marxist tradition is said that to think of political subjectivity and revolutionary agency in the modern world is, it's not just class, it's about geography, isn't it? And it's about history. And it's also about, and here's the Gramscian moment too, it's also about the battle over real abstractions, especially European universalism and these big categories of humanity and man and nature and all of these things. And so what you're struggling with is so important. I'm not sure what my question is, but I think what I've been struggling with and through are the ways in which capitalism today is bringing together the work of extra-human natures, the work of social reproduction, largely unpaid, but not entirely, the wombs for sale and the global nanny chain and all that, and paid work into new combinations geographically that we've never seen before, and I think it is leading to new imaginaries that are quite powerful. So I highlight food sovereignty, but I think in some ways food sovereignty is very limited. I think you cited some other examples. And I think that maybe Donna is struggling with this when she's talking about tentacular thinking. And, she is, as ever, the one-woman poetry slam. I just wish that she was more Marxist, that she could be tentacular in terms of putting these moments of work, and those are still crude objects, unpaid work of nature, unpaid work of humans, paid work of humans, and these are geographically in a new configuration. And this, I'll throw this open to everyone, but this is something that I think your wonderful talk raised for me, so I just want to throw that out there and leave it to others to ask questions.
Okay, I think for the second one.
I got two questions, one for Ben and one for Jason. Ben, I really like this aspect of scapegoating in this whole picture of the capitalist scene, but I wonder how specific is this to capitalism actually? Like when I think, for example, about rather uncapitalized spaces like Laos, for example, which I'm familiar with. Yeah, witch hunts going on as well, and it doesn't really have to do with primitive accumulation and things like that. So,
no, well, I found that there's a book published that you also wrote talking about a witch hunt in first century BC China.
Mm.
And you know, I mean, there's scapegoating all through the ancient world. I mean, look at the treatment of you know, like the Christians under the pagan Roman Empire. I mean, Norman Cohn wrote a book called Europe's Inner Demons, where he talks about how you know, the Romans persecuted the pagans using Christians using these particular tropes which the Christians had appropriated and used to persecute the pagans in turn when Constantine converted in 300 AD. So I mean, like you know, I mean, there's examples in the ancient world. I mean, I think that like the point that I was trying to make is that I mean, you know, you know, I mean, with the example of the European witch hunts in particular, which reached the decline of feudalism and the rise of beginnings of mercantilism, which prefigure you know, industrial capitalism, sort of like these city-states. I think I need to do more reading, to be honest. But you know, I mean, that sort of bridges that gap. I mean, the whole point of 300 years of that terror was to put down yeah, you know, huge peasant rebellions against you know, reimposition of class rule. You know, there was the Jacquerie in France, the peasant rebellion in England in 1380 or something like that. The you know, German peasant war. I mean, there was a war that you know, in Germany and you know, various other parts around the country as well. And I mean, they needed institutionalized terror to you know, to put down those rebellions and reinstitute class rule in order to, because you know, I mean, who was the biggest landowner in Europe in the Middle Ages? The Catholic Church. You know, so I mean, it's like it was vital to you know, to the maintenance of you know, class structures, and you know, while they sort of you know, while you know, and to the social engineering thing, which you know, Federici writes about with you know, sort of turning women, you know, making women into brood domestic capital, you know, sort of like you know, with this social reproduction role, like the enclosure movement, which enclosed the commons and forced you know, peasants off the land in cities to become wage slaves, and you know, colonialism, you know, sort of you know, the bleeding of colonial territories, so sort of these cheap natures, this accumulation of cheap natures in different ways being you know, carried out on the basis of scapegoating pretexts, you know, blame shifting pretexts, you know, like bringing civilization to the savages. You know, we're saving Europe from the lights of Satan. You know, all this sort of business. You know, but that's, and yeah, even though it does predate capitalism, and it's sort of like it's you know, it's sort of greases the wheels of primitive accumulation until the Industrial Revolution, where it's sort of, you know, and they still need them too. I mean, the value of these moral panic studies, deviant studies, sociology, and moral disengagement and social psychology, is they reveal that you know, the dynamics that are apparent in European witch hunts are also apparent in you know, what you know, we call modernism, modernity. Familiar with that great, you know, the great stage play, The Crucible, you know, comparing you know, the McCarthyist witch hunt in the 50s to the Salem witch trials. I mean, what was the basis of that? I mean, that was sort of this big complex based on what we now call moral disengagement, plus the deviant production associated with moral panics. You know, I mean, this is all stuff that's come up since the 1970s, which, you know, is named out. But I mean, it continues to be a thing. I mean, look at we had, you know.
All right, Ben, we got
Sorry, yeah, I mean, it's like it's still a thing now, obviously.
Okay, before we hear Alyssa, you have a second question?
Yeah, just a quick one, and I hope it's not too mean a question, because you were making a point